What is up, and welcome back to Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. As always, I am your host, Brandon Silvers. Can't believe we are in 2023. Hope y'all had a fun and safe holiday celebration. Let's go ahead and start the year off right and get into it. Okay, so we've all heard some variation of the phrase, it's not what you know, but who you know. In this world, particularly in America, networking is key to working your way up through any industry. This is not a new concept, but the amount of attention it's receiving is, particularly in regards to the entertainment industry. And since we can't really care about something without creating buzzwords for it, the phrase Nepo Baby has taken off. And as you can guess, it's a term to describe the relatives of famous people who are seeing success in the entertainment industry as a result of who they're related to. New York Magazine's Nate Jones recently wrote an article about the term and the rise behind this newfound awareness of nepotism, and it turns out this offended the Nepo Babies. And of course it did. Everyone likes to think that their own hard work and talent is the sole reason for their success, and if you point out some sort of outside factor that may have contributed, we take it personally as though you're saying that we didn't actually work hard or aren't actually talented. As many of the Nepo Babies who took offense pointed out, nepotism is a thing in all industries. Now, what they seem to be missing is that its impact is felt more based on the amount of opportunities within an industry. For example, there are fewer opportunities in entertainment and sports, so it's more noticeable there. However, having a parent who's a doctor can make it easier for you to become a doctor for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's an industry you've been exposed to your whole life. Your parent can walk you through the process to get to college and then med school. They probably have the money and knowledge to get you in the best schools to get you into college and med school, so that'll make the path easier. And it's all these connections and knowledge and resources that'll make the road smoother for you. Now, does that mean that you didn't have to work as hard or aren't as smart as someone who had a harder path? I can't afford to go to a doctor, so I can't be sure. But I would certainly hope not. Why are we all of a sudden mad at Nepo Babies when, like I was saying, it's basically always been a thing? If I had to guess, it's a lot of people coming to terms with the realization that we don't really live in a meritocracy, and they're pissed about it. And rightfully so, because we're told, hey, if you work hard enough and you're good enough at what you do, you can achieve X, Y, and Z, when in reality, there are limits to what you can achieve based on the amount of privilege you're born into. So what makes a good Nepo Baby? Someone undeserving of our scorn. And what makes a bad one? How bad is nepotism in general? Are people who get their jobs as a result of it truly worse than people who don't? Luckily for us, sports is full of Nepo Babies, so let's take a look at the sports world and see which Nepo Babies did it right and which ones will get eaten first during the revolution. First up, let's talk basketball. In a sport that values height, even more than skill in a lot of instances, merely having the genetics of an NBA or WNBA player gives you an advantage off the rip. We saw this in last year's NBA Finals between the Warriors and Celtics, where a combined 5 sons of former NBA players played. And I did some holiday week level research on this, and between 25 and 30 sons of former NBA players are in the league right now. And we're starting to see the sons of former WNBA players show up more frequently now. Leading Rookie of the Year candidates Paolo Banchero and Jaden Ivey are both the sons of former WNBA players, and ESPN's Jamal Collier just wrote an article about this connection and how having a mom in the WNBA has helped them succeed. And don't forget about the OG WNBA son JaVale McGee. His mom Pamela is a basketball Hall of Famer, and his sister Amani also played in the WNBA. And we've seen it in WNBA players too, with Cheryl Ford back in the day, who I pulled for as a child after learning that her dad was Karl Malone, a man who is terrible in every way, including being a deadbeat dad. Cheryl deserved every bit of her success for overcoming being related to that asshole. Or current WNBA legend Candace Parker, whose brother Anthony was a solid role player in the NBA for a few years. So who did it best? As I said, height helps, but you need skill and hard work to take it to the next level. And the official Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silver's greatest NBA Nepo Baby of all time took it to many next levels. And he did it while hating Karl Malone almost as much as I do. That's right, Kobe Bryant. If you've been around me for at least 5 minutes, you know how I feel about Kobe. For the record, he's the second best shooting guard of all time and a far better player than his dad, Joe Jellybean Bryant, was. Joe was a 6'10 forward who played 8 seasons in the league, and his career high for points in a game was 34. Meanwhile, Kobe averaged 35 points per game for an entire season. Nepo babies get a bad rap for not having to work as hard for their achievements, but Kobe was the antithesis of that. The stories about his work ethic just get crazier and crazier. How long after hearing the name Kobe Bryant did the words Mamba mentality pop into your head? His name is basically synonymous with hard work. Now, I will say Kobe came along a little bit before basketball nepotism became so mainstream. Now, who led that charge? That would be the second best NBA Nepo baby ever, Steph Curry. Steph grew up in a very privileged household as a result of his dad Dell's 16-year NBA career that saw him win the Sixth Man of the Year award, the kind of privileged home that people have in mind when they trash Nepo babies. However, none of that privilege helped him when he was trying to get a scholarship to play at his dad's alma mater, Virginia Tech. Steph ended up at Davidson instead, where he led them to the Elite Eight and became a national phenomenon. That opened the door for future sons of former NBA players to receive scholarships unless they are absolutely garbage, because no college coach wants to be the guy who tells the next Steph Curry that they don't have a scholarship for him. Shout out to Seth Greenberg. Now, I can't really blame Greenberg for not knowing Steph was going to turn into the greatest shooter ever and revolutionize the game of basketball, but I mean, damn, it's Virginia Tech. Do you know how many terrible players they've given scholarships to? We've come so far from that point as a basketball society that NBA teams are already trying to position themselves to draft LeBron's son Bronny, who's still in high school. And I still don't really know how good Bronny truly is. But I mean, are you going to pass up a chance to draft LeBron James's son, particularly knowing LeBron wants to play with him? Dwayne Wade circumvented that whole process by simply joining the Utah Jazz's ownership group and having their G League team draft his son Zaire. He was drafted 10th out of prep school ahead of guys who were stars for their college teams. And unlike Bronny, I know how good Zaire is. Not very. He averaged nearly 19 minutes per game his rookie season, and in those 19 minutes, he put up 1.8 points per game, 2.5 rebounds, and an assist on 27% shooting from the field and 19% from three. Basically the direct inverse of Steph Curry. Back to Steph, he's also part of the most confusing NBA family tree in NBA history. Let's see if I can keep this straight. Okay, so his sister is married to his former teammate and current Phoenix Sun, Damian Lee. His brother Seth plays for the Brooklyn Nets, and he's married to Doc Rivers' daughter. Doc is a former player and current coach of the 76ers, and he had a cousin and an uncle who played in the NBA as well, and his son Austin plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Wait, Austin Rivers plays for the Timberwolves? Anyways, nepotism doesn't always work out like Kobe and Steph. It can be bad. Worse than Zaire Wade bad. So who's the worst? Well, as a Lakers fan who spent many nights yelling at Luke Walton, I was tempted to say him. But we can do even worse than that. Let's talk about another former Laker I yelled at a lot, J.R. Smith. Now, he's undergone a bit of a post-NBA transformation by enrolling at NC&T and joining their golf team after he retired from the league, where he was primarily known as a knucklehead the majority of his playing career. And what an incredible knucklehead he was. Probably best known for nearly giving his then Cavs teammate LeBron James a stroke by letting the clock run out at the end of regulation of an NBA Finals game that they ended up losing in overtime. JR's basketball IQ was in the basement, but his talent and athleticism were through the roof, so teams loved taking chances on him. He was promising enough that at one point, the Knicks, when he was playing for them, they signed his brother Chris to the roster to keep JR happy, which was actually completely unnecessary because he already had weed for that. Allegedly. Chris had been an okay college player, but he belonged in the NBA even less than the Knicks do. He played a total of 2 minutes in the 2013-14 season, and he scored as many points as you did. It was basically like if the Whoopi Goldberg movie Eddie was about a player instead of a coach. But you know what? We can do even worse than that. The Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silver's worst NBA Nepo baby of all time is Thanasis Antetokounmpo. Like the Knicks did with Chris Smith, the Bucks signed Giannis's brother in 2019 because why not? Giannis is a generational player, so keep him happy however you can. And there had to be some sort of potential there with Thanasis, who isn't quite as big and athletic as Giannis, but he's still 6'7" and ripped. But unfortunately, this dude is awful at basketball. And it's not just that he's bad, but how he plays that makes him so annoying. He's someone who plays hard not for the sake of playing hard, but for the appearance of playing hard. That means coming in the last 2 minutes of blowouts and flying around recklessly while everyone tries to stay out of his way and not get hurt. The world got to see just how bad he is when he was selected to take part in last year's All-Star Skills Challenge with Giannis and their other brother Alex. As the name suggests, skills are involved: dribbling, passing, shooting. And Thanasis was out there fucking up all three. After what I saw, I'd take Zaire Wade over him any day of the week. And look, I know the Antetokounmpos have an inspirational story and they made a Disney movie about it, but surely it would have been just as movie-worthy without Thanasis taking up a roster spot just to flex on the sideline when Giannis dunks or does his post-game ladder tosses. All right, let's end the basketball talk with some sneaky nepotism that you may not know involving Celtics MVP candidate Jason Tatum. Jason's cousin is former Allen Iverson step-over victim turned most underrated coach in the league, Ty Lue. And Jason's godfather is Larry Hughes, who played for the Wizards Michael Jordan's final season and the Cavs when LeBron led them to the finals way back in 2007. Most importantly, he played Kelly Rowland's boyfriend in the music video for my middle school idol Nelly's song Dilemma. The most important part of that music video was that they were texting Kelly Rowland on a two-way pager using Microsoft Excel. If you're a big sexter, I highly recommend using an Excel spreadsheet to set yourself apart. Everybody uses words and pictures, but nothing hits quite like a graph or pivot table to really set yourself apart. Speaking of Nelly, go ahead and throw on Batter Up because it's time to talk baseball nepotism. This show has different, some might say better standards than the Baseball Hall of Fame, so the official Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silver's GOAT baseball Nepo baby is none other than Barry Bonds. Back when black players were the norm, Barry's dad Bobby and his godfather the great Willie Mays, who never played Kelly Rowland's boyfriend in a music video, were teammates on the team Barry eventually played for, the San Francisco Giants. Bobby was a three-time All-Star and Willie Mays was Willie Mays, but Barry managed to blow them both out of the McCovey Cove water. Barry, like Kobe, is the antithesis of the Nepo kids don't work as hard theory, since he literally took banned substances in order to work harder. It doesn't get any more hardworking than cheating because Mark McGwire is getting more recognition than you. It's rare to see an athlete improve when they're already considered one of the best ever, but Balco's creams and clears and whatever other substances sparked a transformation in Barry that we hadn't seen since Steve Urkel transformed into Stefan Urkel. Asterisk or not, Barry is the career home run leader, the single season home run record holder, a 7-time MVP, and a 14-time All-Star. Unfortunately, it seems like Barry couldn't escape the infamous Nepo Baby sense of entitlement, as he was hated everywhere he went, and I don't know what he's up to now, but I can only assume he's still an asshole. What's wild is we might not even be talking about Barry if another Nepo baby had stayed healthy. Ken Griffey Jr. seemed well on his way to being the GOAT, and even with all the injuries, he finished his career with 630 home runs, thanks to the sweetest swing I've ever seen. And he did next level Nepo baby things like hitting back-to-back home runs in a major league game with his dad. He was also infinitely more likable than Barry, even when considering the baseball purists who fainted when he'd warm up wearing his hat backwards. There have been a ton of father-son duos in baseball, and it seems to be becoming even more prevalent. But why? First of all, baseball is a super technical sport. Hitting a baseball is the single hardest skill to execute in all of sports, in my opinion. Michael Jordan couldn't even do it. So having someone who can get you on the right track with that as early as possible is a huge advantage. And obviously someone who played at the highest level and knows how to do it from experience is going to be the best teacher. Secondly, it's super expensive to play baseball. Between travel leagues, equipment, skill coaches, etc., the costs add up quick. You don't quite have to be a millionaire to play, but it sure as hell doesn't hurt. So it's really no surprise that the first two picks in this past year's draft were sons of former major leaguers. I'd argue that because of those reasons, baseball is a sport where having a dad who played is the most advantageous. Basketball, for similar reasons, is a close second, and recent NBA drafts have backed me up on that. Speaking of drafts, let's talk about the most valuable Nepo baby draft pick in MLB history. Mike Piazza. Piazza's dad was friends with Tommy Lasorda, and as a favor, Tommy drafted him to the Dodgers in 1988. He was the last player picked in a 62-round, 1,390-player draft. Imagine having 1,389 people picked ahead of you for anything. Now, despite being the last pick in the draft, Piazza, who I liked as a child because his name reminded me of pizza, made himself into one of the best offensive catchers ever and a Hall of Famer. That's a hell of a return on a favor. Everybody can't be Mike Piazza though, and because baseball is so hard, there have been a ton of Nepo Baby busts. But there's only one baseball Nepo Baby who deserves the title of worst of all time, even though he never played in the big leagues. Drake LaRoche. Back in 2016, Drake's dad Adam played for the Chicago White Sox. Adam himself was a Nepo Baby as both his dad and brother played in the big leagues. As I said, this isn't unusual. What is unusual was Adam's approach to parenting. Let's talk about parenting, horseshoe theory, and the law of diminishing returns. Let's say the majority of parents fall in the middle in terms of being involved in their children's lives. Then you have this extreme behavior of not being involved at all, like our enemy Karl Malone. That makes Karl a weirdo, among several other things. So what's the extreme on the other side that would make them a weirdo as well? Being too involved in your kid's life. Horseshoe theory says that these two extremes have more in common with each other than they do with the parents in the middle of the spectrum. Or something like that. I'm not your poli-sci professor. Now, it seems impossible to be too involved in your kid's life, except as I mentioned before, this is one of those things where the law of diminishing returns applies. There's a certain amount of time that is optimal to spend with your kid for the purposes of their development, and once you go past that, you begin creating a problem for other people to deal with. Other people like White Sox Vice President Kenny Williams, who had to tell Adam to stop bringing Drake to the clubhouse all the damn time. Adam got all offended and he retired, giving up $13 million, and that's not even the weirdest part. The weirdest part would be that some of his teammates were planning to boycott in support of the LaRoches. One teammate, Adam Eaton, even said 14-year-old Drake was a leader in their clubhouse, which is both laugh out loud funny and a bold-faced lie. I saw a video of Bo Jackson having to explain to Drake who he was. You cannot be a clubhouse leader no matter how old you are if you don't know Bo. Kenny Williams said, in what should have ended the controversy, to name one job where you can bring your kid to work with you every single day. And that's the correct thought. I bet more teammates complained privately, and that's why the request had to be made in the first place. But they were afraid to come out publicly against grown men who felt like they were being led by 14-year-old Drake LaRoche. Imagine a 14-year-old complaining because Ken Griffey Jr. is warming up with his hat on backwards. This didn't happen, but you just know Drake LaRoche was the type. Okay, so baseball and basketball lend themselves to nepotism, but football doesn't, in my opinion, at least not as much, because that shit hurts. You have to be wired differently to play in the first place, and Tua's weekly concussion protocol trip isn't super appealing to a lot of people and would probably be even less appealing if you had to see someone you were related to go through it your whole time growing up. However, it certainly does happen, and the greatest Nepo baby in NFL history is actually part of the greatest family in NFL history, Peyton Manning. Peyton's dad, Archie, was a fan favorite quarterback for the Saints, even though his stats looked terrible by today's standards, and the Saints weren't particularly good by any day's standards when he played for them. Peyton, on the other hand, has some of the gaudiest stats in league history and won 2 Super Bowls. He was known for his obsessive film study and work ethic, although you wouldn't know by looking at him because he carries all his muscle mass in his forehead. His younger brother Eli was better than Archie, but not as good as Peyton, although he did manage to fall ass backwards into 2 Super Bowl wins himself, both against the Patriots. I know Bill Belichick has lost a lot of sleep knowing that this is the Manning that had his number. And the Mannings aren't done, as Peyton and Eli's nephew Arch is the top high school quarterback recruit in the country. Now, where you see the worst parts of nepotism in the NFL is in coaching. It's a major factor in the diversity issues they have, but it can also be hilarious. Such as when Bill Belichick hires his son Steve and you learn that Bill Belichick has a son that looks like a bully from a 1980s B movie. Or when the Denver Broncos have to fire their coach in the middle of his first season because they're so terrible. That's right, we're talking about Nathaniel Hackett, whose dad Paul was a longtime college and NFL coach. Nathaniel got the Broncos job, and then they traded for Subway robot Russell Wilson, and a lot of so-called experts liked his chances to take them deep into the playoffs despite never having been a head coach before. All that preseason hype went out the window when Hackett lost his first game in large part due to his huge coaching errors, such as not using any of his 3 timeouts as the clock was running down at the end of the game. Hilarity ensued when on the alternate broadcast of that game hosted by our friends Peyton and Eli Manning, Peyton's forehead nearly exploded exploded while he was begging Hackett to use a timeout as he was watching it all unfold. Hackett never got any better as the season went on, going 4-11 with his last loss being a 51-14 blowout on Christmas. So he's gone now. Okay, so what has sports taught us about nepotism? Well, it's just like every other privilege. Acknowledge its existence, don't be an asshole about it, work like you don't have it, and most importantly, use it to open doors for others who aren't as privileged as you are. And I'm well aware that I didn't cover the rampant nepotism in the sports media industry, and I'm not going to say any names, Jack Hollingsworth, but it's really gotten out of control. All right, you got a Nepo baby I should have mentioned, hit me up at beyondthearc843@gmail.com or on Instagram at the Brandon Silvers, and let's fight about it. And I appreciate y'all supporting me, so please keep doing that. And also support the people who support me, like friend of the show, Danny Foxworth, who dropped the trailer for his new baseball podcast, At the Plate with Danny Foxworth, a black baseball podcast. Thank you, Jesus. Go subscribe to that wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been another episode of Beyond the Arc with Brandon Silvers. I appreciate y'all. Hope you are doing well, and I will catch you next week.